everybody. Welcome to the Tanya Talks podcast. You guys, this has been a long time coming and in the making, and I so appreciate your patience. Really, Tanya Talks podcast is going to be all things where we talk about family, faith, relationships, emotional healing, and truth over trends. That's really what this is about. And for many of you guys who might be new on my journey, and those of you who have been following my journey for a little while, I actually want to talk a little bit about my story, why I'm here, and how this is, I believe, is going to really help so many people. The Tanya Talks podcast is going to be about all things Tanya talks with experts and people in the field that are going to help, improve and bring so much depth to these conversations. But it's also going to be where Tanya talks about different topics, whether it's myself or with other people joining me. Okay, so first, many of you guys, of course, know me to talk about family estrangement and the cutoff culture. And yes, I cut off my mom. It was my mid-20s because I believed that she was toxic. And I almost lost her because of it. I cut my mom off for about 2 years, and like thousands of others, I blamed her for the pain that she caused me. And I used the infamous words like toxic and a narcissist to describe her and how she treated me. But what if I told you that it actually started over something pretty small, and maybe it obviously wasn't a small thing when I was younger, but in now being older and going through the emotional healing, you realize that it kind of was small, and it started around my 15th birthday. And growing up, just to give you a little bit of backstory, growing up, we grew up in community housing. We actually struggled a lot financially. And I remember I got my first job at Tim Hortons at 14 years old. And I'm talking about, I was like working overnight. So guys, I don't even know how that was legally even allowed to be letting a 14-year-old work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. But hey, I did it, and we hustled. I remember making like $6 an hour. And it was my 15th birthday. My sister's birthday, by the way, is 9 days after me. She's 2 years older than me. She's the oldest child. And she had a lot of health issues growing up. She had, facial blisters, all kinds of health issues. And naturally, that's for any parent. We understand how extremely stressful that is. What I didn't understand when I was younger is because of those health issues, my mother would naturally protect her, and she was a lot more vulnerable. So whenever growing up, I would get in arguments with my sister. My mom would defend her more often. And that's not to say, you guys, that any of this is okay or justified or my pain wasn't justified. I'm really just coming from a place of helping you understand my perspective at that time. And so she would pay attention to certain things about her and her behavior and what she needed and all of that at such a young age. And so I started naturally to feel like, well, why is she always on her side? Why is it all about my sister? Then came around my 15th birthday, and I didn't get a birthday cake and I didn't get a gift. And my sister birthday is 9 days later, and she did. And I remember asking my mom, like, Mom, why didn't I get anything for my birthday? And she said, well, you're working now. I figured that if you wanted something, you can actually buy your own things. And, to hear that, you almost feel like you were completely disregarded. Like you didn't matter. Like your other sister, your only other sister, another sibling was more important. What I didn't know at the time is that my mother was dealing with abuse and a lot of issues happening in the family during that week of my birthday, which explains why she probably remembered my sister's a few days later. I don't think she ever forgot it. She never forgot it again after that. But it's a matter of life really does happen and has us make some unintentionally not so great choices that can affect the people around us. All that to say, though, that planted something in me at such a young age, and I built this narrative. And what can happen to us in our childhood is we tend to attach and latch onto these situations that happened, and then we almost make it as if it's a reflection of ourselves. She didn't care about me. I built this narrative that I wasn't worth enough. She loved my sister more. I was overlooked. My sister got the attention. And then I started to feel more and more invisible, especially when my little brother came along, and he was the boy. He was the first one. I felt even more invisible. And once you build a story like that, you start collecting proof that not just her, not just to my mom, proof that she's careless, proof that she's toxic, but also proof that, see, she doesn't think I'm worthy. We start to build a narrative around our own self-esteem, our own thoughts, our own insecurities based on the behavior of other people without recognizing that Their behavior is because of what they're going through, not necessarily because of how they feel about us. And what's incredible is I find that a lot of adult children, really everybody, nowadays, when you don't process that real emotional healing, you attach your self-image and your identity to situations that happened when you were growing up, especially when it comes to our family and our parents. That's actually not accurate. And so I started to build proof. We naturally collect proof. We collect proof to meet our narratives. That could be sometimes for good, great situations. We're collecting proof and that's feeding us. And look at me and I have abundance and I'm happy and all of that. But it also happens incredibly fast and at an alarming rate on the negative. You're collecting proof that this person is bad. You're collecting proof that this is a negative situation because naturally, when your mind has created a narrative, it wants to find the proof to validate that perception. And so I was collecting proof to cut her off and I felt justified. That's how estrangement grows. It rarely explodes overnight, it builds. And I'm not saying that my mom was perfect. I'm not saying that any parent was perfect. She, of course, wasn't. And I'm not saying mistakes don't hurt. They do. This is never to say that you're not justified in the feelings that you have, because the pain is real. The pain that I felt was so real. But the narrative that I built around that pain wasn't. I was using my feelings as facts. And when we use our feelings as facts, once again, we're looking for proof, even if that proof is not necessarily accurate. And we're living in a culture that rewards cutting people off faster than it rewards understanding them, because the victim mentality sells. People are looking, and when I say the victim mentality sells, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to be a victim, but people want to feel like they have a place to relate their pain to and that there's a potential solution. What many people don't realize is the solutions that we are seeking in this everyday world and society right now is actually validating our pain and not really giving us a true path to repair. Okay. And I remember I had my therapist actually help me recognize my pain. And that part is important. And I'm going to talk about it in the next video where I talk about my 3-step framework about actual healing. And stage 1 being like, therapists are great for helping you uncover your childhood wounds, right? And I'm going to talk about it in more detail. And so I was uncovering these wounds and these childhood moments that shaped my perception of self, because I really wanted to heal my perception of self. And why was I making bad relationship choices? Why was I feeling unworthy? Why did I feel all of these things? It has everything to do with our upbringing. And that part is so important. But then when I'm being told by a society or being validated to protect my peace, naturally evolved to cutting her off. And so my pain was validated in this therapy room and in this culture. You're strong, you're empowered, you're doing an incredible job. Good job for doing that. You have to do what you have to do. You're so strong. We know it's hard. So my pain was validated. And then that became the end of the conversation. I stayed the victim. My mom stayed the villain. And staying the victim felt powerful for a short moment, but it doesn't truly heal. And that's what we don't talk about enough. This is not about shaming adult children. It's not about defending bad parents, because there's some pretty awful parents, right? It's not about forcing reconciliation, especially when safety or real abuse is happening. I will never justify for that. But what I'm speaking out against is a narrative that is being pushed harder than ever. Why are families breaking so quickly? Why are parents labeled so easily? And most often than not, it's our mothers. Is the amount of blame that's being put on our mothers is growing so easily, because it's so much easier to blame it on the person or to point fingers at the one person that has the most unconditional love for us. And it happens with dads. It's been happening with dads far more for a very long time. But what's insane is how much quicker it's happening with the moms, where a mom, you're physically carrying a child inside of you. You will always forever have a piece of your soul outside of your body. And until you're a mom, you don't really understand that. And we cannot be building a society that's teaching that love is disposable, that we have to point the blame and the shame and the guilt and as the villains of our story in order to truly heal, because that's not accurate. That keeps us stuck. And there's nothing emotionally strong or resilient about staying stuck in your wounds. How have we come to a place, and why does one human mistake feel like a life sentence? that means that we are refusing to grow. And sometimes that's hard to hear because naturally everybody wants to grow. Many don't know the real resources to help them grow. So throughout these episodes, I ask that you have an open mind. Have an open mind that you might not agree with everything that I'm going to say here. And that is okay because we need to be challenged. We need to hear new perceptions. We need to be able to sit back and think and absorb what truly feels true to you. Okay? We have to be able to have real conversations about what real repair actually requires, what real emotional strength and emotional healing requires of us. Because all over social media, we hear about this consciousness and this Zen and meditation and all of that to calm our nervous system, which is so incredibly powerful. But it goes so much deeper than that when you are able to completely rewrite a new version of the narrative that you've built, the narrative that is actually real, and the narrative that you can create to truly become a free, peaceful person. When I stopped needing my mom to be the villain, that is when I truly became happier and healthier. And I learned her story. Like I said, I'm going to talk about it in the next episode. I'm going to make sure that that's going to be the next episode, the 3-step framework that I talked about on Oprah, that you've probably heard about it on several places. It is so important for us to create this deeper level of understanding and compassion for all humans, not just our parents, for every single relationship that we have moving forward, because we have to realize that everybody is operating from their upbringing, from their level of understanding, from their level of even insecurities and wounds. And most often than not, it's not a personal attack to us, yet we take everything as a personal attack in a world that validates and even rewards this kind of thinking. So when I started to think about my mom and I learned about her story, she was one of 16 kids. She was the 15th out of 16 kids. Yes, same mom and dad. She was the youngest girl, being the 15th. Her dad died when she was 3. She grew up being unintentionally neglected by her mom. She was learning to take care of herself at such a young age. She married young, by 18 years old. She faced incredible hardships. Her health was declining. She had a lot of health issues. And when I saw her as a woman shaped by her own wounds, not just my pain, and this is so important because I had to remove myself from the relationship for a moment. I didn't look at her as my mom or anything like that. I looked at her as a woman who was shaped by her own wounds and pains. And it changed the way that I saw her. And it changed me. And if I hadn't done that work, I would never be here. I wouldn't be talking to thousands and thousands of parents, reaching millions and millions of people and adult children, trying to find their way back to each other, but not just back to each other, coming to a place where they genuinely feel happier, steadier, more grounded, and more peaceful in who they are, which naturally improves your relationships. This is really about the middle ground that nobody wants to sit in, and a lot of people don't want to talk about because it's the uncomfortable part. It's the raw part. It's the part where both sides have to grow. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to meet each other and we need both sides to be able to repair a relationship, because I always say it takes one person to lead, because there is something called mirror neurons. And I'm going to talk about that in another episode, where mirror neurons are essentially people feed off of your energy. And so if you're this grounded, healthy, happy, energetic person, naturally that is going to resonate, especially with your own kids, especially with your own family and your marriages, all of that. And this is where I'm really going to talk about how to start building even a personal accountability, where accountability doesn't mean cut off, where pain can be acknowledged but not worshipped. It does not become a part of your identity, because that is a dangerous place to be. And this is what this is about. This is what Tania Talks podcast is going to be all about. We're going to have conversations that most people avoid, but is necessary. People think about this stuff, but they don't know it. We're going to get deep. We're going to get, and I want to say some of it's going to challenge the narratives that you've been holding on to. That's okay. That's where growth happens. Some of you won't agree. I'm not here to be agreeable. I'm here to be honest, to challenge the narratives. We're going to talk about the hard parts. We're going to talk about the nice parts. We're going to talk about the motivating and inspiring parts, but we're also going to be talking about the uncomfortable parts. The parts that require everybody to grow, to nurture, and to care for families, to talk about the truth, to bring faith back at the root of everything, where faith has been removed from schools, has been removed from workplaces, has been removed from so many places. And this is the place where we can really talk about real healing, where you're willing to sit in the discomfort, because you know that that's necessary to grow. And if you're in that place and you're ready to have these conversations, then you're in the right place. And I'm super excited to really dive into these conversations. And I know, like I said, this has been a long time coming, but I'm more happy and excited than ever to be able to bring to you guys the Tanya Talks podcast.